Hi, it's Nick from the Run Testers, and this is our first look review of the Garmin Enduro 2. The original Enduro was really all about battery life, and it caught a bit of flack for coming in a bit pricier than the Phoenix range whilst having fewer features. It didn't have things like maps and music. Actually almost complicated the Garmin range a little bit for picking between battery and other features. In contrast, Garmin has kept things pretty simple with the Enduro 2. It's coming in very expensive, well above things like the Phoenix and Epix 2 even, and it has kind of all the best features that Garmin offers. That's my understanding anyway. Ahead of this embargo date, I've had the watch and I've had some details, but not the full spec sheets on the watch, but that's more or less as I understand it. It's going to have kind of everything that's available on the Epix and Phoenix in time, even if it's not already on the watch that I'm testing. You are going to pay a premium for that because you're also getting the big battery life that the Enduro range is known for. It's going to cost £929.99 in the UK or $1,099.99 in the US. As far as I know, there's only one model which has a titanium bezel and a titanium rear case with a fibre reinforced polymer in between there. It's got a 1.4-inch power sapphire display with solar charging, and along with the 5 buttons, it's got a touchscreen, kind of like most of the top Garmins do these days. The watch has a 51mm case, which is the same size as the original Enduro and the Phoenix 7X, but it's actually a bit thicker than both of those watches. It's 15.6mm as a kind of 14.9mm on the 7X and the original Enduro. It comes with two straps, one is the nylon that you've got on here, and then a normal silicone strap as well. And it weighs in at around 70 grams with the nylon strap or 64 grams without. The other big new hardware feature is that it now has a torch built into the top of the watch, just like the Phoenix 7X. And actually this is twice as bright as the watch on the 7X. You've kind of got 4 settings of white light and then a red light torch as well. Comes to the software side of things, the big kind of key news here is that maps have been included on the Enduro 2 after they were, I think, somewhat unwisely left off the Enduro 1. You've also got music storage and the ability to link up with, things like Spotify Premium, like all Garmin's music watches. When it comes to the maps, you're getting all of Garmin's great navigation features, things like Climb Pro, turn-by-turn directions, the up ahead feature that will show things like aid stations on your route and the distance to them. And there's also the next fork feature, which kind of helps you navigate if you're not using a course, because it will kind of flag up the next fork on your trail and give you the names of the trails coming up. Enduro 2 also gets multi-band GPS support like Garmin's other top watches, the Epix 2 and the Phoenix 7. It's also got a Sat IQ GPS mode that's also popped up on the Epix and Phoenix recently, where the watch will dynamically choose the best GPS mode for you. So, if you're in tricky conditions, it will select multi-band to ensure that you're getting accurate results. But if you are in more kind of favorable GPS conditions, it will switch to one of the lesser accurate modes to try and save a bit of battery while still producing accurate tracks. A new feature on the watch is grade adjusted pace, which we've seen on the Chorus range recently, and also you get it in Strava after a run, and it's basically a pace that takes into account the incline you're on. So if it's all downhill, your grade adjusted pace will be slower than your actual pace, and vice versa when you're running uphill. Battery life remains the star attraction here, and Garmin kind of saying you're getting a 40% increase on the battery life of the original Enduro, and that really reflects the battery life when it comes to tracking activity. So the kind of star stats are things like you're getting 110 hours of GPS or 150 hours with the solar included. Now that's just GPS only. If you start using things like the multiband support, that number's going to come down a bit, but it's still very impressive in the multiband mode that you get 68 hours of battery, or which can rise up to 81 hours with favorable sunlight conditions. In smartwatch mode, you're going to get kind of 34 days or 46 with solar. It's actually a little bit of a drop on the numbers of the original Enduro. So really the 2 is much more efficient when it comes to tracking activities and extending battery life that day, rather than in just pure smartwatch mode. Other little nifty feature it has is an automatic rest timer if you're running ultra, so you don't have to actually pause the watch. You can just go into an aid station, do your rest, refuel and all that, and it will automatically log that period for you so you can look at it afterwards. Now, like I said at the start, I believe that all the training features on things like the Epix and the Phoenix are coming to the Enduro in time. I know that readiness isn't on the watch I've been testing yet, but it is set to arrive in early August and all that kind of thing. So yeah, given the price and what's going on here with the Enduro 2, expect kind of everything to be on there, but we'll check back in on that, in the full review. But that's my understanding after discussions with the Garmin. So I've had the Enduro 2 for 5 days ahead of the launch date, and I've used it for 4 runs and a couple of yoga sessions, and I've been comparing it to the Garmin Epix 2 linked up to a HRM Pro Plus chest strap. So the Epix has been very accurate for me on GPS accuracy, especially in the multi-band mode. So yeah, I've been using that as the benchmark to test the Enduro 2 against. When it comes to design, I really like the look of this watch. I have to say, it's very similar to obviously the Phoenix range, but the little yellow accents on the button and around the screen really do set it off, and it's a very attractive watch in my opinion. It's a bit kind of thicker than the Phoenix 7X, but on the wrist I didn't really notice that. It's a pretty comfortable watch. I've been wearing it 24/7 in quite hot conditions, and it's been okay to sleep in. So yeah, overall I think the design is very pleasant and very much in keeping with the rest of Garmin's watches. Obviously the nylon strap is fantastic. Like, I'm a big fan of nylon straps. I've got kind of third-party nylon straps on all the Garmin watches I wear now, but the actual Garmin one is a little bit nicer, obviously. The screen is the kind of the usual story with Solar Sapphire Garmin screens, in that it's not quite as bright as the non-solar screens. The screen almost sits a bit deeper behind the glass, so it can be a little bit dull at times, especially in things like dappled sunlight. If you're running through woodland and that kind of thing, it can be a little bit harder to see things like the maps on the solar versions of the watches. But it's very clear in bright sunlight, and in general I've not had any major problems with seeing anything on the watch at any time. I have raised the screen brightness on the watch myself, for during activity and outside of activity, because it's got the battery life. I'd rather have a brighter backlight. But when you're using it in tandem with the Epix 2 with an AMOLED screen, the Epix 2 does obviously look a lot better, but it's very similar this to things like the 7X, Sapphire Solar, that kind of thing. So when it comes to the GPS accuracy, I've been using the Enduro 2 in Sat IQ mode, so it's been switching between satellites, automatically itself, and been pretty impressed with the tracks it's put down. So I think most of the runs I've done have been in my local forest, and I've done a hard workout on kind of a looped course, and the actual GPS track has matched up very closely with the Epix 2 in multi-band mode. There have been some little wobbles in the Sat IQ mode, and the distance isn't always exactly the same overall, but yeah, no noticeable concerns at all. I also did a hard park run with this watch, and it came in at 5.02k, and it's an accurately measured park run. So yeah, that's all pretty good. I think for me, this kind of dynamic GPS switching mode is available on the Epix and the Phoenix. It's probably something I would use going forward for most of my runs, but I would still go for multi-band for key sessions and kind of races, or if you're going to be very challenging GPS conditions, just because the extra accuracy is still there. But yeah, having a little bit of battery saving is always a great thing if you're most of the time running in nice open roads when GPS only is going to be fine. The heart rate accuracy has been not great, a bit of a mixed bag. Like, I've had a couple of runs where it's just read wrong a little bit, and today it was pretty much spot on against the chest strap. But I think the worst one was I had one long run where for the first few kilometers it read very high on the Enduro 2, like way too high, had me in the red zone, and after a few kilometers it locked onto my heart rate and was more or less correct for the rest of that run. But just having those few kilometers wrong was enough to switch it to a tempo run in Garmin's training analysis as opposed to an easy run on the Epix linked to the chest strap, and it added things like 20 hours to my recovery time. So going forward in my testing, I've done those early runs, I'll probably be using a chest strap with the Enduro 2 to get the most from the training analysis, and that's what I would recommend if you're going to spend this much on a watch. A chest strap as well, I think, is a way to go, or at least an arm strap that you wear up here to get better heart rate accuracy fed into the training analysis it gives you. The mapping is obviously fantastic. Like, it's the same as on Garmin's other watches. I can't really praise it enough. I love things like Climb Pro. It's a really important feature, I think, to have on the Enduro in particular, which is marketed towards ultramarathon athletes, people who are going to go on adventurous runs in the mountains, where having those maps can really be literally a lifesaver, or just generally guide you through new areas and make for a much more enjoyable run, that you have your course set out, you can pick out the spots you want to hit. And I think it's really important it's been added to the Enduro 2. It's a bit of a no-brainer, really. Grade adjusted pace, I think is a useful addition sometimes to the watch. Like, I do think having grade adjusted pace, it does help me slow down on easy runs when I'm going up hills, when I will tend to maybe push a little bit too hard sometimes. But with the grade adjusted pace there, it's a good motivation to slow down a bit. And also, actually, the converse is true as well. It helps you speed up on downhills in hard runs when you're trying to hit a good pace, and you start maybe relax a little bit too much because you're on the downhill. So it's useful at times. I think it's be a lot more useful if you had kind of an averaged pace. So even just a lap grade adjusted pace, or an average grade adjusted pace for your entire run, because of all current pace stats, including grade adjusted pace, it can be a bit jumpy on instant pace, so it's not always the most useful. You glance at it and it's moving around a lot. So yeah, having some kind of average I think would help. And also, it should be said, it doesn't take into account terrain. So if you're running up a really muddy hill, or coming down a very steep technical descent, or it's icy descent even, you're not going to get very much from the grade adjusted pace, because it will just look at the incline and not take into account that you're on treacherous conditions. So battery life obviously is a tricky thing to kind of estimate so far, but after 5 days of use I've dropped down to 74%, which has included about 5.5 hours of outdoor running, a couple of yoga sessions, a lot of playing with the watch, and like I say, I've raised the screen brightness up. So it says I've got 22 days left. left. I don't think it's going to just average out what I've done so far to 20 days. I think it will be longer than that because I have had kind of 2 long runs in the time I've had the watch. So I would expect to get, well into 3 weeks plus of use out of it. And that's actually interesting because I did get kind of 3 weeks out of the Fenix 7X. So you want to see a fair bit more from the Enduro to make it worth the extra money, because otherwise then the Fenix 7X would probably be just the one to get because it's slightly cheaper and it has all the same features and a very good battery itself. But I expect the Enduro to push a bit past that. It's something we'll revisit in the full review. But yeah, my early impressions are that it's going to last very well. And if I get 22 more days out of it, like it's saying now, then yeah, that'll be basically a month of quite heavy use, which would be excellent. So Garmin has a tendency to make their ranges quite complicated at the upper ranges with different materials and different prices, but actually the Enduro 2 is very simple. It's really expensive, but it's a titanium watch with all their best features and their longest battery on it, and that's a quite simple, attractive proposition. It almost makes the choice quite simple because Garmin is, I think, very dominant at the top end of the sports watch market. I think if you are looking at this kind of price range, you're probably looking at the Fenix 7, the Epix 2, or now the Enduro 2. They're the best watches out there in terms of the features, purely on the basis of maps, really. But they also do, obviously, everything else very well as well. So the Enduro, the appeal there is you're paying a bit more, but you get a bit more battery life, and that's why it's so important to see how it does match up to things like the Fenix 7X. Whereas the Fenix, is a slightly cheaper option, which is attractive as well, and there's a lot of range there, so you can maybe fine-tune it to the exact kind of features you want. And then the Epix 2, the standout feature is very much the AMOLED screen, which is, I think, fantastic, but you're looking at more like 4 or 5 days of battery life from the Epix, whereas this is going to say push over 3 weeks towards a month, even with heavy use, I'd expect. So that's kind of the trade-off there. Like, I'm more of a marathon runner, so my longest runs are never, spanning like 5, 6, 7 hours or anything like that. And the battery life of the Epix is, something I'm prepared to live with for the brighter screen, which I like very much. But it's very appealing to have something like the Enduro or the Fenix 7X on your wrist when you don't have to think about charging it for several weeks at a time. And if you are the mountaineering, adventurous ultramarathon runner, then yeah, it's going to be another great option to have. And now you don't have to be annoyed about the fact that you're not getting maps on it, for that battery life. We'll come back into that exact choice in great detail down the line. But I'm enjoying using the Enduro 2, but it's incredibly expensive, and really, you've got to really weigh up whether the battery life is going to be worth that money. That's it, guys. That's our first look at the Garmin Enduro 2. What do you think? Please let us know in the comments below. Are you a Garmin user? Which one would you be buying out of these kind of top 3 Garmin watches that are available these days? Please do like, subscribe, ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time.